Uber and Lyft are under fire. They continue to be under attack by various different local governments around the country, even state governments going after these guys. And that's because they are a threat to the existing taxi monopoly out there, or the taxi oligopoly, I guess would be a more accurate term, a group of companies who have special permission to do business with one another. Well, cartel.
Cartel doesn't necessarily have to have permission. You're right.
It's close. Cartel's close. Let's go to Dana in Michigan. We'll get into the details on that. But Dana, were you in Grand Rapids tonight?
Yeah, I am.
And you're listening to WTKG. Go ahead.
Yes, sir, I am. Hey, you guys, can you explain? I thought I had this down, but I'm not really sure. And for those of us who aren't sure, and it's not that I'm lazy, I'm just so busy because it's summer in Michigan. But could you explain, and I'll take my, answer off the air, but could you explain the concept behind Uber, what it is, and why are people so up in arms about it? I'm catching snippets on things, something about the insurance and people's own private cars and things like that. Could you give us a rundown on that? Because I just heard while I was on hold that you are going to be addressing this. But could you pretend like some of us...
This is a great way to force Free Talk Live to actually get to some of our show prep, because one of the biggest problems we have with this show is we'll tease a story as though we're going to talk about it and then go off on all kinds of different calls to whatever topics. So I'm glad you brought it up, and we will explain it. Thank you, Dana, for the call tonight.
Okay, thanks, guys. By the way, have a good night.
Yeah, thank you. And apparently Grand Rapids has Uber, so if you are in the Grand Rapids area, you can actually utilize this service. Unfortunately, here in Keene, we don't have that. We tried, though, Mark, when you and I were in Austin, Texas. We hadn't really planned very well for what we were going to do when we got off the plane, and we realized that, and we decided, let's look at this Uber thing. We've been talking about it on the air. Lyft is their competitor. That's Lyft, but Uber and Lyft are kind of the two biggies out there.
And what they do is they provide an opportunity for regular folks with regular cars to share rides. And by that, what they mean is to make money through the internet, not being paid cash right on the spot, although I guess you can give a tip if you want to, but they don't require it by any means. And that provides competition to the taxi oligopoly, as we talked about it. And that's really what the problem is.
Yeah, but there's more to it than what you've explained. There's also the technological aspect of it, right? Because it's because of the internet that Uber and Lyft are possible now.
Sure.
And so the way it's supposed to work, now I'm only going based on my understanding of this. I've never actually completed this transaction, because when we tried in Austin, Uber's app told us, sorry, we're not available in Austin yet.
They certainly aren't in Keene.
Due to but in Austin, it's due to the government. In Keene, it's just the market's too small. They just haven't come to this market yet. But due to the government of Austin and various other cities, and the story we've got, it's Salt Lake. But these governments are trying to stop Uber and Lyft, and they don't like the idea of them coming into town. But the idea of how it works is you get the app, you install the app on your smartphone device. And I guess you could do it with a computer too if you had like a laptop and a Wi-Fi access point. But anyway, it's usually the smartphone that you do this with. And so you load up their app. The app identifies your location using GPS, or you can punch it up on a map or something like that. And then basically you say, I need a ride to wherever it is you want to go. And ultimately there are people who drive for Uber and or Lyft who may happen to be in the area. So, for instance, we were at the airport. That's likely a place where Uber drivers are going to be hanging close to, because they know there's business going to be there, just in the same way the taxi drivers hang around airports for the same reason. So you put in where you want to go, and the software hooks you up with a driver. One of their drivers shows up, they pick you up, and then, take you where you want to go. And they do it for a lot less, from what I understand, than the taxi cab companies do. And some of the reasons they can do it for less is because, well, number one, they're not paying for taxi cab medallions, because Uber's not a taxi company. Essentially, Uber's a company. Uber doesn't own any cars. Uber doesn't have a dispatch. They don't have a physical, office with somebody sitting on a two-way radio sending out cabs to different places. They don't have any of that overhead. They have the overhead of running the software, so the programmers that they have to have their software and update it and add new markets and things like that. But ultimately, the overhead's smaller. They're not paying for the taxi cab medallions, and in cities like New York City, those things can be $1 million, as I understand it, per cab, which dramatically increases the cost of doing business.
Dramatically. Well, now, one of the problems with Uber that we've seen up to this point is that people that drive for Uber won't get the kind of insurance you need to sort of do business. But I was in the pizza delivery business. I delivered pizzas at one point in the past. I didn't have the insurance to do that either, and that was an issue then. And we've managed in America to make it somehow or another without descending into a fiery abyss of chaos, without people necessarily having the proper insurance in every single situation.
How many of the Uber drivers are not insured properly?
How would we know?
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
How many pizza delivery people aren't?
Right. And how many times when you get into a car with somebody are you checking their insurance? I mean, even if it's your friend or your family members, how many times have you asked them, "Hey, are you current on your insurance payments?"
She was specific about asking about insurance. I wanted to cover that.
Toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. We'll continue here. But my point is, how many times when you get a ride from one of your friends do you ask them about their insurance coverage? You don't even think about that stuff usually. More coming up here in moments. You can take control. We'll give you the latest on what's happening in Salt Lake, where they are hitting drivers hard with fines. What will happen there? We'll explain coming up. It's Free Talk Live. Are you an Uber driver or a driver for Lyft? These are the ride-sharing companies that have become very popular. In fact, I think it was actually John Bush, who is a friend of the show from Austin. We were talking about how the Austin government in Texas is preventing Uber from doing business. But John actually posted to his Facebook profile. He was so excited. He said, "I used Uber for the first time tonight. Here's how it made me feel. F the taxi cartel. Market for the win, MFer. Wait till the decentralized peer-to-peer blockchain-based alternative reaches the market. Monopolies beware. There is no stopping the market in action." And what he's referencing there with the alternatives to Uber and Lyft, because Uber and Lyft are an alternative to the taxi oligopoly out there, this old kind of business that's been around forever.
And their cohort, their binary, the livery unions.
But there are programmers who are working with the blockchain technology, which is the technology behind Bitcoin. They're using the blockchain technology to create a decentralized system of being able to hail a rideshare, essentially. I don't know how to better explain how it works exactly, but it's
how would I know? I don't know how other people's businesses work, but it sounds.
Well, this one cuts out the middleman, so it won't even be a business, as I understand it. This will just be a way for people who have rides to offer to connect with people who have who need a ride. So essentially, they would be cutting out the middleman of Lyft and Uber from this situation. So maybe Lyft and Uber's days are numbered at this point.
That is the marketplace. It's creative destruction. The old businesses need to go away. You don't want to create protections for the candlestick makers at the cost of the light bulb manufacturers. You don't want to create protections for the farriers union that puts shoes on horses at the cost of the automobile manufacturers. These things happen, and as the marketplace matures, they're going to happen more and more quickly. We all benefit. Every one of us benefit. Yes, there's no doubt. Somebody who was a blacksmith lost their job and had to go get some other form of employment because somebody was producing cars. There's no doubt about that. That happens. But old forms need to go away. New forms need to take their place.
Yeah, and you've got to be able to adjust to the market. And you, as the provider of those services, if the service you're providing is going out of style, you got to know when the right time is to leave. And even if you get forced out, you can't be all despondent about it. Crying about it's not going to bring back the farrier business, right?
Nope.
So anyway, here's a story from Salt Lake Tribune. New high-tech ride-sharing services like Lyft and Uber say they're cheaper than a taxi, quicker, and friendlier. Salt Lake City, however, contends they are essentially unlicensed taxi services and is cracking down by issuing expensive tickets to drivers.
You know what I love about another thing I love about Uber and Lyft is that they allow the drivers to rate the passengers too.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that way a driver could see a bad passenger before they go and pick them up because the information's there. You can get it right out of the app.
I hated when I did drive cab, and I hated certain times of day and certain places that I would have to drive. I actually sort of said I'm just not going to do it, and so they put me Yeah, I
Puking
just
in the
wasn't
back.
interested in in that. Right, there's a lot of mess to clean up, and it's not comfortable. Either you feel like you're in danger from violence, or you've got to be hit on by a bunch of people you don't want to be hit on. No, I'm not going back to your apartment with you.
This is terrible what they're doing to these poor people. Angie Palmer, she's a college student and a driver for Lyft. She says, I received 2 tickets for $6,500 each.
Wow.
$13,000 in 2 tickets that she received because she gave somebody a ride. She gave a couple people a ride. Fellow Lyft driver Amanda Wardell, a single mom who drives for extra money, said it was pretty intense when she saw her own ticket for $6,500. She says, I haven't made that much driving for Lyft, so there aren't words to describe how it felt to see that. The city uses secret shopper tactics to ride on Lyft or Uber, then later sends a ticket by registered letter to the drivers. David Everett, that way you don't know who the person was.
Sure, that way they can use their undercovers over and over again.
David Everett. So they're not making the arrest right there on the spot like they might with a prostitution sting or something.
And I'd like to point out that if in fact these Uber people were dangerous to society, then they're just letting them continue to operate. If it's worth arresting somebody, and that's what a ticket is, then you need to handle it right away. They need to pull them over, put them in cuffs, throw them in jail. Either that or they're not a danger. Now, they obviously recognize these people aren't a danger, and all the city is doing at this point is acting like they're just
it's a protection
milking
racket.
people.
It's just a protection
racket.
They're protecting the old businesses who've had their licenses for decades. The old cabbie companies, whoever they are there in Salt Lake City.
They're not getting $6,500 tickets. They're paying their money up front in licensing fees.
They've been around for a long time. They know the people in the government. They've got sweetheart deals, and everything's groovy with them.
Can you imagine for a second if a city would just let people give rides to people without handing out tickets? My God, it'd be chaos. We'd descend into fiery anarchy. It's insane. We don't need these people.
No,
They're
really
crooks. The people handing out these tickets are leeches. They go home. They wear badges. We're supposed to respect them. They give them parades when they die. No, there's nothing respectable about this.
I don't even think this is the cops, Mark. I think this is a city issuing some sort of a – maybe they do have some cop doing this, but it's certainly not a cop in the classic sense of they're putting them in handcuffs.
Well, these are the taxi cops.
Yeah, they're just sending them a letter. Of course, if you don't respond to the letter,
speeders don't get tickets. Don't get put in handcuffs. They get tickets.
So what happens if you don't respond to this $6,500 fine? What happens if you don't pay the fine? And by the way, remember when we were talking about some of the other news about Uber? Remember when Virginia, the state of Virginia, was coming after them? Which, by the way, I believe they backed down since then. But Uber has been saying, and I don't know about Lyft, but Uber has been saying they're going to stand behind their drivers.
Right.
So I wonder if Lyft is doing the same thing, meaning that they would, if you get this fine, that they would provide you with legal assistance, essentially. That the drivers aren't going to have to go on their own on this. And so we'll find out more about this particular story. If you are an Uber or Lyft driver, especially in Salt Lake, we'd obviously love to hear from you, or anywhere where similar crackdowns are happening. You can take control. Maybe you think these people are the Uber folks shouldn't be around. I want to hear from you if you're anti-Uber. Let's go and continue with your calls and thoughts. Uber drivers are under attack. Salt Lake this time issuing $6,500 tickets for people caught driving for Uber and Lyft. And Brian, you're on in Northern California on Free Talk Live. Hey, Brian.
Hey, thank you very much for taking the call.
Sure.
And a really great show. Very great, really good topics and very
Thanks.
insightful dialogue. I just had a question. Years ago when I was a kid on the Central California coast in a little town just south of Hearst Castle, we had a situation where elderly people who couldn't get to their medical appointments and stuff, there was a group of seniors, usually in their 60s or whatever, that would volunteer to take these people to their medical appointments, take them to the store for groceries, etc.
That's sweet.
Should they have been fined $6,500 because they did that? Because they did it for nothing.
Well, in some cities they probably would be if they even accepted a tip. Because there was a story out of Miami. This is one of the sort of iconic stories a few years ago that we talked about. And this was actually, I think, before Uber and Lyft really even came into existence, where an older guy, probably in his 70s, picked up a young lady who was at a grocery store. She wanted a ride home. She's, looked like a single mom or something like that. She wanted to get a ride home. And he was willing to give her a ride home. And then at the end of the ride, she insisted that he take $5 from her
for gas,
for the gas money and the time and all that. And he refused. He did not want to take the money. He was just doing this as a favor. I'm sorry, ma'am. Look, thank you, but no, thank you. And she kept pushing it on him until he finally took it. Just to look, all right, fine, I'll take it. Just get out of here.
Then she arrested.
And then he was arrested. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they cracked down on those folks.
Because this was a community effort. Usually it was started by maybe the Rotary or the Lions Club or whatever, and said, look, we have this need in town, and we have retired people with cars, and they do have insurance and stuff like that.
So they weren't cracked down on, though. You were just kind of asking if some people would crack down on them. They weren't. Cracked on?
Tongue in cheek. It's kind of stupid to do this kind of stuff, and it's equally stupid to find people that have just found a new niche, a new type of, like you said, between the livery stable and the automobile and stuff like that, and they're filling this niche. And why they should be penalized? I'm sorry. Protecting the old oligarchy.
That's all it's about. It's not about protecting customers. It's about protecting the oligarchy. Thanks for the call, Brian. I appreciate hearing from you. A little bit more on the story here from Salt Lake City in the Tribune there, sltrib.com. Everett, this is David Everett, the chief of staff to Mayor Ralph Becker, said the city had issued 118 citations to Lyft and Uber drivers.
That's a lot of money.
However, all but 17 of them were warnings with no financial penalties.
Okay.
So they're threatening people with most of the citations, and then 17 of them are $6,500 extractions, demands for cash. Everett said the city had warned the firms that, quote, if you're someone making money providing a ground transportation service, you need a ground transportation license. That's the way it's always been in the city.
We've always robbed people for giving rides, and you will not stop us from robbing people. We make the roads. You pay for that in gas taxes? So what? You must give us more money because you're making money, and making money's evil.
He adds that enforcement keeps a level playing field between the new companies and the older taxi and shuttle services. Meanwhile, Lyft is fighting the tickets, contending it's different from a taxi service and is not covered by current taxi laws. Lyft is providing an attorney for their drivers, so that's good, because we knew Uber was doing that too, and says that it will pay any final fines for them as it has elsewhere nationally when other cities have similarly challenged the company.
It's got to take your breath away with that $6,500 ticket,
rough,
though.
Man. Well, it's a real indicator of who you're dealing with. You're dealing with a criminal gang who there's no limits for these people. They don't care that you're a single mom trying to make a little bit of extra money on the weekends.
Yep, they end up throwing you in debtor's prison for this. The equivalent, because the government's the only organization that can throw you into a debtor's prison. They throw you into jail for this. People will just say, "Oh, you should have followed the law. I've been too scared to stand up for the government my whole life, so you should just follow the law."
Let's go to Joe. He's in Michigan, listening to WTKG in Grand Rapids. Hey, Joe.
Yeah, this is straight up theft, is what it is. And this, what do they care if somebody, gives you a little bit of money to give you a ride someplace? It's just a protection racket, like you said. It's just
they care because, hold on, Joe, they care because they want money, right? They want to get their cut. They hate it. These bureaucrats, these parasites, they hate it when business is being done and they don't get a cut. And there's no, they're not getting a cut from whenever somebody buys an Uber or Lyft driver. None of that money is going to the city directly.
They're getting their fair share through gas taxes.
They're getting something through gas taxes.
It's the same as in the old days. They'd go after the bootleggers and stuff. They didn't care about people going blind, drinking liquor.
Sure.
It was all about tax money, and it's like the mob, man. It's like, pay us money to protect your business. Meanwhile, they're the ones who really are vandalizing the businesses to scare people into paying them money not to do it.
It is not an inaccurate statement at all to liken the government to the mafia. That is essentially what they are.
The most successful organized crime institute in a given geographic area.
They've done it more successfully.
They fly flags. They have a funny way of appointing dons.
And they're so effective that they've managed to get people to pledge allegiance to them.
Yep. They'll say you're a bad person if you don't like them.
And worship their icons. Thank you for the call tonight. I wish we had more time for the folks that were on hold.
Thanks.
If you didn't get in tonight, hey, we do it tomorrow. Mark will be here for the live Sunday edition. You can join him over at freetalklive.com at that time, or maybe on your local radio station as well. We'll see you online in the meantime at freetalklive.com. Have a great weekend.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.